All right. All right. I'll count us down. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Why We Roll, the tabletop role-playing game design chat show from the Stillfleet studio. As always, I am Chris Pickett, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Wythe Marschall.
Hey, it's me, Wythe Marschall. What's up, guys?
How's it going, Wythe?
It's fine. You know, it's here at the end of summer, and we are excited for spooky season. The temperatures here in Philly just dropped to a beautiful, not that hot. And game wise, I feel like there's so much going on, but in a kind of good sense. Where honestly, we have some announcements. We're coming to the end of the game jam, but it all feels like it's kind of clicking into place. So excited to really focus tonight on why we roll, and yeah, you know, we're just enjoying as usual. Really thinking hard about how fun these games are. Basically, when can we next go to a convention to tee up a topic here, you know, and play with
Oh,
strangers? So.
well, speaking of which, tonight we are joined by Benjamin Eastman, one half of the wonderful podcast All Year I Dream About Gaming Conventions. What's up, Ben? How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Sometimes I tell people it's a or the podcast title is something I wish I could go back and change because it is too long. But it's two guys from Philadelphia. It's always sunny in Philadelphia, getting abbreviated down to sunny. We just never got to the point where we could definitely have shorthand for that, unless it's like conventions, which doesn't tell a lot. But I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I was just down in Charleston, South Carolina over the weekend visiting some family. Long drive back. Should have flown, but doing great. Super excited to get a chance to come on in the longer format and get to experience the presence of both the hosts this time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you haven't listened before, we do have a short form interview that has already been published where I believe it's just the two of you. But we also have been interviewed for All Year I Dream About Gaming Conventions when we met at Page at the Philadelphia area gaming expo, which is not in Philly, but it is in the area. So make of that what you will, I guess. Well, Ben, right at the top here, just for folks who haven't already listened, who don't already know y'all's podcast, could you just give us a elevator pitch, kind of what's the intro for All Year I Dream About, and who is Quarex? Who is this mysterious co-host of yours?
Mysterious co-host of mine who's probably chasing his child around the Mississippi River in Iowa. So I'm Ben. I am one half of All Year I Dream About Gaming Conventions, the podcast you didn't know you needed about Gen Con, Origins Game Fair, PAX Unplugged, the AYIDAGC Convention Industrial Complex, and beyond. What we do,
That's good.
Yeah. We talk about really what we do is we release about once a week. Though if you look from end of April to now, we've had about two releases a week. I'm actually looking forward to staggering that back a little bit as we get off of Gen Con. But we haven't missed a weekly release in over 2 years now. We're about to this evening going to record episodes 243 and 244. So we're getting up there in terms of the numbers. But what we do is we focus on how to get the best experience you can out of gaming conventions. Some of it can be related to just preparing for it, knowing when the deadlines are. We have episodes called Get On It, which is you need to get on this and make sure that you get your badge and are ready to start hitting refresh to get your hotel room. We talk about the different events that you can play while you're there, especially a lot of RPG events, which is my favorite side of the thing, but also the games you can play, the exhibitors you can meet, and just all sorts of different things. And once we've gone to those conventions, we'll also come back and review. So we've got a lot of interviews anymore. I think is one of the better ways to try to understand what people can do at this point is going in talking to people like yourselves and having whether it's having a conversation on the exhibit hall floor or talking with someone for 10 to 15 minutes and giving our dreamers, as we call our listeners, giving our dreamers the opportunity to hear about cool stuff that we're interested in and we're excited about. We've also recently spun off another podcast called All Year I Dream About Game Reviews, which is in its infancy. We released episode 6 last Friday, and we are slowly rolling that thing out. I've got assistance from people other than don't think I haven't forgotten about asking about him. My co-host Quarex, who is really like, he's the guy who brings the excitement and the joy, more so than myself, to our podcast. He's certainly a little sillier. I describe him as a tall blonde Viking of a man. He is. I see him 3 times a year, maybe. Gen Con, Origins, and Page at this point. I always forget how tall he is because I rarely have to tilt my head up as much as I do when I see him. But he just loves going to gaming conventions. So compared to myself, who I am a designer first and a podcaster second, even though the podcast has taken over more of my life, he goes to conventions for the love of the games, which is admirable. So anyways, Quarex, if you're out there watching, appreciate you. Love you, bud.
Nice. Shout out to Quarex.
Yeah, we also appreciate you, Quarex. I did have the pleasure of running a game of Danse Macabre for him back in, God, when was that? When is Page? Is that
January.
April?
January.
That was January. God, it feels like a lifetime ago. But yeah, I did have the pleasure of meeting him, getting to game with him, and yeah, lovely dude, very fun, and yeah, he definitely brings a lot of energy to the table, which I always appreciate. Because I'm sure we'll get into this, but at cons, when you're running games, you don't really know what to expect when you sit down. It could be a mixed bag. It could be a real mixed bag. But no, he definitely brought very high energy, a lot of excitement to the table, and it made that game a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yep. And usually people are, I find generally con goers who sit down to play an indie game, they're going to have fun. They want to try something new. They want to have fun. But it is true. You get a mix of, I'm kind of nervous, I'm going to lean in as much as I can, but I'm a novice to the genre, right, to the hobby. And then you get people who are like, hold my beer, let's go all in, and they start reeling off their backstory, and it's been 30 seconds, so they just found out about the game, like, they just saw it and sat down. So it's really fun when you find those folks and you can kind of connect with them and build relationships. And to your point also, Ben, about seeing people, like, I find this is a very odd thing about the industry because it's so small, but the conventions are a big piece of it, and it's become virtualized with Discord and all that, which in some ways is good, and it's opened up new audience. But a lot of, from the industry side, like, you see people at conventions, so there are these friends that you have these kind of strange relationships with. You see them 2-3 times a year, and that has become, to me, it's like, oh, that's normal. Yeah, that's how I know that person. I see them 3 times a year like clockwork or whatever. So it's an interesting thing, thinking about different levels, I guess, of engagement with cons. And I love also that you have your dreamers and you're talking with your dreamers about enjoying cons. We should, Chris, start doing that with our rollers. Let's talk about we're rolling with our rollers. So then you can help bridge that world of the dreamer to the roller. If you're going to cons, now you want to design games, whatever.
Guess what, rollers. Dear listener, you are now a roller, whether you like it or not.
And if you're in San Francisco, you may be a Bay City roller.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think about that. Oh, man, that's funny.
Should we step back and start a little bit at the beginning, Ben, and ask about basically how'd you get into games, and especially if folks didn't listen before, you don't have to repeat yourself or anything, but how did you come to design games? And if you want to shout out sort of some of your history coming into, hopefully we'll talk about some more recent work, some newer stuff. And then, of course, we'll talk a lot about game conventions. But in general, kind of, do you want to give us a lay of the land with what brought you into games and to designing games?
Yeah. So, my first experience with games, I was talking with my sister about this, what it really involved us going in a camper home and going to different camps around the area. I grew up in upstate New York. And we would sit at a table and we would play different card games just as a way to pass some of the time while it was raining out or whatever. Another thing I think about is my late friend of blessed memory, Dan Tubman, introduced me to he sat down and he's like, my father has this game, he would like to play it sometimes, and it turns out it was Dungeon, like an OG copy of Dungeon, which I didn't realize until much, much later was sort of my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. From there, really, I think I probably took a break throughout most of middle school and high school until a friend of mine who now lives in the Madison area, and I get to see when I go to Gamehole, he's like, you should play Magic the Gathering, which was a blessedly brief foray into spending too much money on cardboard. But what that did is when I went off to college and I found similarly minded people, I came back from winter break, and they're like, hey, we're playing D&D and you're going to play a cleric, which was sort of very much my onboarding into, well, you're going to have a role to play and you're the last one here, and wound up playing that. I really don't think I've taken much of a break other than maybe my first year of law school in terms of role-playing games. A lot of D&D, a lot of indie throughout that time. I have in my almost ruinous financial mistake was Warhammer 40K in my mid-20s. I still have most of it. It is definitely something that is definitely something that I enjoyed and wish I could get back to a little bit more. But then I also look at the prices of stuff and like, oh,
it's pretty wild. As a former 40K enjoyer myself when I was much younger, every time I look at contemporary or new Games Workshop pricing, I'm just like, how is that sustainable for anybody? It's crazy. Although I will say the indie war game scene is pretty interesting. If you can find miniatures agnostic stuff out there, I feel like that's a good way into it.
At Gen Con this year, I got a couple of games which were Morkborg hacks for Forbidden Psalm that I want to check out a little bit more. But these were purchases for a friend of mine who does graphic design, but also just says, hey, go buy cool zines for me. And he's someone who has played 40K since it was called Rogue Trader. So this seemed like he loves the Morkborg aesthetic. He likes these sorts of things, and I suspect he will. When I get the package to him of the zines I've gotten over the last year, he will be very excited to see those ones in particular. So, So I mean, in terms of game design, I think it's always sort of sat back in the periphery. Once you start playing a game, I'm like, but I can do this. I can make magic items and things like that. So some of my early work is probably magic items that you'd find on EN World or Giant in the Post message boards that are blessedly lost to no one's looked at this for a while, and therefore it's been locked down. That wasn't great, but sometime around, let's say 2015, I got involved with a living RPG campaign called Greyhawk Reborn, which was then doing Greyhawk in early 5th edition, and started writing for that sort of thing. And I go to conventions, and I go to small conventions in the Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia Panhandle area, and go and play and run things. And that's really how I think I learned how to put together something that I could hand to somebody else. Because you really, when you go to a convention, you have to be, well, there's lots of things. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but you're going to sit down with 6 people, hopefully. And you may not know them. You may recognize them. They may be people you've seen at previous conventions who've sought you out again and are excited about your thing. Or they may just be 6 people who are like, well, we want to play D&D. The first time I went to Gen Con, I ran a game that I had written. It was an 8-hour RPG game. It ran from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. And I got 6 people from Wisconsin who got done with work at, I believe it was 8 p.m., drove to Gen Con, picked up their badges, and then walked to my spot and then sat down. And that was their first 8 hours at Gen Con. It was a choice, but the events were submitted really late is probably the way to describe it. But with that, you also have to figure out you can make things very complicated when you know the people you're dealing with. But when you're writing for any random person who has whatever amount of money or time or willingness to click sign up on an event, you also have to be able to make sure, I don't want to say writing to the lowest common denominator, even though it's a little, I don't intend it in the way that that comes off as an insult. It's just, you need to make sure that you're writing so everybody can have a good time, right? Because the goal is that you're going to, for whatever you're getting out of it, whether it's a badge or whether it's the enjoyment, whether it is some amount of money that they're paying you as part of the ticket, you're going to have them you're going to sit down and they're going to play with you for 2 to 4 hours or upwards of 8. Hopefully have a good time, hopefully learn the rules if they need to learn the rules, feel like they've accomplished something at the end of the adventure, which is not always doable, but the more that you can write towards that is helpful. And then also just making sure that what makes sense before you hand it off to is eventually moved out of self-publishing and writing for other publishers as a freelancer, being able to make sure that you've got it at a level where the editor is going to look at it and have, I mean, if an editor isn't making changes, I question whether or not they're an editor at all. But at the same point, if hopefully it's fewer things, it's minor typos that have snuck through once you're tired of staring at the same text for the 5th or 6th pass, or they're coming through with very insightful comments as well. Like, well, what about this? Like, people buy these things so they don't have to run, and people buy adventures so they don't have to make as much stuff up. Name this person, things like that. So that with a lot of conventions, I'd say between 2015 and 2018, were very formative, a good proving ground in terms of being able to sit down and figure out that I actually can do this and people can have a good time, and really learning how to be a better GM as well. Even if you're not somebody, I assume that your rollers are people who are designer leaning, but even if you're just trying to be a better GM, like this is a great way to do that. So
convention games really are kind of a crucible. You you learn how to be concise, you learn how to communicate very clearly, but also like keeping a lot of high energy, sometimes in a very short amount of space. I mean, when we run games, we try to keep it to like 2 hours or so, and so it's a lot that you're packing into a very, very short amount of time.
Yeah, we did 3-hour games at Gen Con, and it's interesting with the difference because I think they're just different experiences. But 2 hours I think is the minimum to me. I've done 1 hour kind of like showcase scenes, but 2 hours is enough to get through a plot. 3 hours I think is a good amount of time, but it is also a little exhausting when you end up with, you do 2 hour games in a row and take a break, and you're probably done for the day, or you have more energy. I think with 2 6-hour games in a row, it was like, wow, that is a very measurable difference in my energy level, right? But
right.
But yeah, to all the things you're saying, Ben, I mean, I think that's so true that like it's not about the lowest common denominator. It's also adventure design, and we've talked about it a little on the show. We could talk about a lot more maybe in the season ahead, but I'm thinking of conversations like Josh Demansky, even back to like when we talked to Luke Gearing. When you strip adventures down, like what makes a good adventure? I mean, they're procedures, and you can add a lot of vivid stuff, and I love that stuff as a writer, but I do think, especially at a con game, I mean, you just don't have time. You won't use it, and the people, because it's about the other person's enjoyment, there are more veteran players who will bring their own vivid details, and then you'll have new folks who are a little shy, or maybe their kid is there, it's their first game or something like that, and which we've been lucky enough to have that experience, like with Blister Critters or something, someone saying, hey, my kid wanted to play this, and then everyone has fun. Well, how do you achieve that? It's not necessarily dumbing it down, but it also isn't making some incredibly Byzantine Game of Thrones plot in 2 hours for a 12-year-old to try to understand. It's like present a scenario that feels high stakes right away, and everyone gets to participate, everyone gets agency, and the adventure has compelling stakes throughout. And those are, it's easy to say, but I mean it really is like, it's the simple stuff, it's nailing the simple stuff, and then you can always do the more complex, like LARPy, we want to do 8 hours immersive storytelling. But I do think running standard, like take your game, if it is runnable this way for a trad adventure RPG, and try to do a 2-hour version with strangers. And it's a great, as you say, crucible, Chris, I think is the perfect word for just, is there stuff about the game that isn't quite clear? Do you know what I mean? You'll kind of know right away, because people will be looking at you nicely, but they'll be like, I don't really know what this power is or what this score does. Right. Even like character sheet design, right? Like, well, also in the chat, I have to shout out Vex. Vex is very into play testing and good at this stuff. So just, I feel like I've learned a lot just talking to Vex and reading some stuff recently, like Vex was sharing. So yeah, this is a great topic. We can talk all day about how to run games at cons,
the other thing, and this is something you'll definitely learn very quickly when you do not know the people you're running a game for, is that plot does not survive first contact with the players. So whatever they're doing, unless it is a system which is very railroad assumed, and you will get stuff like that, like Call of Cthulhu to some degree will be something like that. But being able to have it something simple enough and flexible enough to allow for either the choice, the illusion of choice, the quantum ogre, however you want to put it, and be able to justify things. And the players will also really just sometimes, especially when it's a one shot and they don't care about it, they will test the limits of what you can do. I was at Origins and I was playtesting something we ran at Gen Con, and one player was just like, "Hey, I have this spell called Hold Portal. Can I shut this door?" And I'm like, "Well," I thought about it for a moment. I'm like, "Well, you're not wrong, but it is a portal into our world, not the portal back. So what you would do is while you have that spell up, is leave the portal open." But it was something insightful and made its way into what is currently the final version of the adventure, and we'll see if I do something with Zine Month for it, something like that. But anyways.
No, that's great. I also
That's
feel
awesome.
like that happened with us at Gen Con with the PICARO adventure that now I think I am going to publish as a little group of capers, probably I think system agnostic capers for sort of historical fantasy games. And it's a heist. And
Mhm.
in 3 hours, we got through 2.5 hours, almost 2 hours and 45 minutes without them stealing the thing. And they figured everything out, but it was two parents, a kid, and it was like two families. And all the adults were like, still overthinking it. And there's a great moment when like the teenage son who seemed bored had gotten really really into it through the course of learning on their character sheet they actually had a bunch of badass powers, and that their parents just were like kind of too shook to like do the heist. And then so this was a real Leroy Jenkins, like this 15-year-old interrupting his dad to be like, "I killed that guy," and it was a great perfectly timed Tarantino-esque ending that would not have happened had not it been there been a table dynamic that had nothing to do with me. Because yeah, in a way, the parents were unconsciously, I think, testing the limits of, can we just enjoy talking in the year 1700 in this game and not actually do anything? And it's like, well, you can, but that's not the point.
Right.
So,
It's the difference between an adventure game and a story game. It's
yeah.
like, well, we do have a goal in mind. But yeah, what you were saying, Ben, about railroading, really, I mean, it kind of is almost Proustian. It brought back a lot of memories. I think, especially when I first started running games at cons, I was always very apologetic about having to railroad the plot a bit and being like, "Listen, this isn't how I normally like to run things. I like to be more open-ended at my tables, yada yada. But like, we've got 2 hours. We're gonna jam through this thing." And that's something that, like, just the more experience that I have with it, the less I feel self-conscious about. Like, I might say it at the top and just be like, "Hey, it's a con game. We've got a very specific A to B. We're gonna jam. We're gonna get through it." But then it just doesn't get brought up again because most players don't care or mind. They're kind of just happy to be playing. They're happy to be there. Is I think that can find a way to allow a little bit of space and just be like, "Look, it's going to be on the tracks, and that's okay." Most people feel fine about that.
I think it's part of the social contract of playing a convention game is you have a time frame in which to achieve your goals. You want to have your fun within this amount of time. You don't want to spend too little. If it's a 4-hour adventure, you don't want to get done at 2 hours. Be like, well, that's time. Which unfortunately was something that happened at Gen Con this year for a group where people just rainbowed their way through it. And but at the same point, like there's parts where it's like I had to tell someone in an adventure, like, "Yeah, there's a spot and it's not part of the adventure." And they're like, "Can I go there?" I'm like, "You can, but we didn't write that. This is a very you can't go past this part of the adventure video game moment." And they're like, "Oh." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry."
Sorry, that's the edge of the map.
It's kind of what it was. At the same point, it is. If we run it again, I do need to. That is the spot that I'm now going to write in order to help build that up, because that was part of the same adventure. It was built to run for 3 hours, and then I thought it was going to run less. We'd done it before in 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I thought it was going to run a little bit slower, just knowing that we weren't going to be pushing on the brake as hard. And it wasn't me pushing on the brake; it was the players. They're just like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to get it done.
The players hitting the gas.
Yeah.
Well, this is
awesome.
This is somewhat of a segue. We were talking about writing process before, and how and advice, and how these things go hand in hand. And as we're saying, like, writing for cons is generally the advice. But how do you approach adventure design? So can you take us through your process a little, or give an example, a recent example of, like, where does the idea come from? How do you think about it more broadly as an adventure I might publish, and what is the relationship there with the cons? If that makes sense.
I mean, a lot of my early stuff, especially when self-publishing, has usually been me collaborating with someone else. I have a very good friend whose name is Matt. If you look on the DMs Guild, we almost exclusively worked together through that first period of time until I started getting freelance offers, and then that sort of began to fade away as his kid got older, and I was had these greater freelance opportunities. But usually, like, the seed of adventure, when it's coming from me, just is me driving in a car and thinking about things like, oh, I wonder what would happen if this, or I hear someone make mention of something, or you hear something, and for whatever reason, that sparks the creative juices, where I go, oh yeah, and then what I'll usually do is begin to work that out, and I may talk it out myself on my voice recorder, which I have to right of me, just in case we're having any issues with audio, because usually I'm also driving when inspiration strikes, for me personally. But then I'll either go to my collaborator and say, this is the idea, and we'll work things out. Right now I'm working with a guy whose name is Tim Hitchcock, who's done a lot of stuff in the Fantasy 20 space, including he worked on a lot of the early Paizo adventures before Pathfinder. I think it was actually called Pathfinder, and it was just 3.5. But going through and working through those sorts of things. In between us, we have, I think, 40 years worth of adventure design, more so him than me, but like, we know things that work and don't work, and he may have a great idea, or we have to be the one who says, well, I need to roll it back and make it manageable, and I may have a great idea and goes, yeah, I did that in 2010, that's a terrible idea, and this is why. So, like, one idea I had at Gen Con was like, well, we're going to write an adventure in 4 different tables. We're going to go through 4 different B plots. And he goes, yeah, I did that for Paizo. They only took 2 of them, and I only paid me for 2 of them because they only asked for 2 of them, and I decided to write the other 3 because he'd done it for 5. It was too complicated, and I wouldn't do that. So, anyways, from there, usually once I've talked myself into it being a good idea, I'll begin to sketch it out. I'm usually using, I'm probably of an age that's not too old, but enough where handwriting things still makes a lot of sense, where I'll sit and write something out by hand. And for whatever reason, it feels like the creative process is a little bit easier that way. And I'll begin to sketch out the plot, and you sort of have the first act, second act, third act, conclusion, background and setup, first act, second act, third act, which is usually the fight with the bad guy, and the conclusion, and then begin building that out. Sometimes I really like using Dice and Logos maps. I actually joined a game jam that said don't use his maps, and I'm like, oh no, because I'd found 3 maps that were perfect for it, and they're like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do this.
Well, never mind. I'm not joining this game jam.
I think I'm going to try it. It's just going to be my poorly drawn maps as opposed to something gorgeous and lovely from Dyson.
You got to, like, do your own version, like, maybe not trace, but like just try to freehand redraw the ones you like, and just it'll be different. It'll be weird.
Yeah, get some grid paper and just go to town. Like it's really like it's 1981 again.
Yeah. Well, I would be -3, but I point taken. And then from there, I mean, it depends on like what the throughput happens to be like. Am I just writing a game for my friends, which I do, like, though anymore, I will say that a lot of times I just sit down and I say, what game are we playing? And then just ask 5 questions and run an adventure. It is a little scary how good I've gotten it at just completely improvising everything. But am I writing? Am I doing something for my friends? Am I self-publishing this? Do I set it on a shelf until a publisher says, "Hey, we're looking for this. What can you do for it?" I'm like, "Well, I've got this thing, and here's what it looks like." And this is why I think it's a good fit and different stuff like that. And then from there, it really becomes a question of like, what's the system? What it is you're looking for, and it's taking it out of sort of that initial formatting and crafting it to the system that it happens to be. I think is really where you're going to. I remember in college that we had a speaker who came and said, "Why is there a W in playwright?" I think Chris has heard this joke before.
I haven't, no, but it just made me laugh automatically. I was like, well, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. And I forget the exact joke, but really the point of it is that a play is not created, it is wrought. And that's why you've got the W, there. So similarly with adventure writing, like, unless if you're putting your heart and soul into it, which is something that I often do, not all the time, but I often do, I'm putting myself into it, and there's some amount of my perspective that shows up, even in like a fantasy 20 adventure, where, for example, Kobold Press has Tales of the Valiant, which is the 5e Heartbreaker. I wrote the second adventure for it called Trouble at Mossbeard Mill. I tried, if you go through and you read it, which is strange for a Dungeons and Dragons game, you can get until the last encounter without actually having to fight anyone. And that, people may not have seen Wythe pull his hand down like that, but like it's interesting to see. And there's part of me in that where it's just like, well, not everything has to be a fight. And really, I know we're playing wizard superheroes, but also like you're fighting ghouls who are going to like crack your bones and suckle out your marrow. And if you're an average person, you're gonna be afraid of that. So how do I craft this together? And now that I think about it, it's the second to last encounter that you could do without fighting. Though I think you could probably also use a sleep spell, but. There's something I try to put a little bit of a challenge to myself in whatever adventure I'm writing as well, whether it's a content, whether it's a message, or whether it's just like, here's the challenge to myself. This is a brand new system, which is really a mostly old system that's about a decade old at that point. But how do we go through and how do we re-envision this play experience in a way that is not just, well, we kill things and we take their stuff. So.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I feel like it's a hard thing to avoid, especially in adventure game writing. Mm-hmm. And especially, for cons where it's like you want to have kind of high energy, you want to have movement and things like that. And kind of the easiest way to get that, I feel at least, is just to jump into combat as soon as possible. But I do think that there's something really fun and really elegant about just having other options, even if they're brief, even if it's just, like in a Danse Macabre adventure that I run a lot at conventions, it kind of has like 2 branching pathways, one that's going to put you right into combat and one that it kind of allows you to be a little bit more sneaky, a little bit more thinky. And I try to do my best to telegraph those kind of from the get-go so that people can choose the flavor that they want for that adventure. But yeah, I mean, it can be tough to deny the siren's call of just combat of murder hobo, And
if you've played Trouble at Mossbeard Mill and killed your way through it, that's also a valid play style.
Sure.
Reading it as a GM, you can also present it as, well, you don't have to do these things. You can get through the full first act without pulling a weapon if you want to.
Yeah, and I think some of it is a question of options and paths to the points y'all have made. Are there branching paths? Is there player agency to pick a play style as a team or for individuals to shine? And then partially, Ben, I think what you're saying, it's something I was just writing about today for the our weekly Analog Union newsletter email. But one reason I like game jams, which is similar but different to cons, but in terms of writing something, is it's constrained, right? I only have so much time, I only have so much space, and usually there's a theme, and it might be, let's say the theme is blood splatter, all fighting, or no fighting, everyone gets along, or choose your own adventure, time travel. I mean, who knows? But it's sort of the same idea as if you were primarily coming up with ideas both for your friends and imagined publishers whom you actually know, but like kind of shopping them around, seeing what ideas are cooking, and trying to kind of come up with a lot of ideas and get them going, is making sure that each one is interesting to you. I think as a writer, that's really important. You can't, if you think it's boring, it's going to be boring. So it can't be a constraint that's just awful to you. But if it's a constraint where you're like, yeah, okay, I've never done that one, even if other people have, frankly, it doesn't have to be that you are innovating, the constraint. It's just a constraint that you haven't done, and you have a story you want to tell, and you're like, yeah, that actually works. Weirdly, it'll be a zombie adventure, but you never fight them. It's always kind of running away. So I think there's a lot to that, and bringing that same idea, whether it's a game jam or a con game, finding the hook for you that makes it interesting, so that when you do sit down, you will be high energy because you want to kind of, kick the tires. You put all this brain meat into it, and you want to see, what the players do, and whether they, they screw it up or whatever, they change it. That's part of the fun, right? There's a process there.
A brain meat.
Brain meat,
Other times, what I've liked to do lately is also like, to some degree, adventures that can be like tutorials. Like, here is this new setting, and the way you get around the setting is all of these different ways to go from world to world. Whether it's walking through, I don't want to call it a Stargate, but like kind of like a Stargate, you're walking through mirror portals from one location to another, or you're going to sleep and you're dreaming, you wake up in another location, or you're just on a boat going down the river Styx. These are all different valid ways to do it. How do you teach that to players in a way that gives them choice agency, but also like presents the setting to them? Like, that was one. That's a one. I mean, I guess I sold that long enough. It's been in print now for a year, but those are other fun things. It's just like teaching people a setting or teaching people how to play a game, without also making them necessarily realizing they're sitting through the tutorial like it's the first part of a JRPG.
Yeah, or the first part of like a modern, like, I'm picturing a Metal Gear kind of game, but Chris with zombies, and it's like, oh no, what do I have on me? I have a sling and a broadsword, and it's like, okay, there's way too many zombies. There's no way to fight, I have to run. And the tutorial, but they're moving kind of slowly. They haven't seen me yet. And it's like, I do think, Ben, to your point, you have to build in those didactic hooks for players as well. So you build things that you're interested in. Sounds like, I think we agree on that. And then you build in things that any player can do right away to kind of understand the rules at a very basic level, as well as the world, the where are we, and maybe get interested, right? Build hooks for them. So I think those are some really good points to think about with specifically, adventures you're going to run at cons. Do we, just to follow up on that?
Yeah.
Do we want to switch to, okay, now you've written something, you've run it at cons maybe multiple times. I don't know. You want to talk about your playtesting process, and then kind of where you go from there and some of your experience with writing for print, and if there are differences, if there's things you want to, what's the next step, basically.
Yeah, or what translates over between the two.
Yeah, so one thing at conventions anymore, I've got enough of a CV, so to speak, where I can go to a publisher and say, hey, I've done this, and that. I really love your system, or I want to do something with it. And sometimes they'll be like, here's my card, follow up later. Sometimes they're like, yeah, it's all right. The stuff you've written before isn't necessarily what we're looking for. Other times they'll be like, well, why don't you try writing something and show up at a convention and run it? So I have occasionally done that sort of thing where I show up at the convention and run a thing that I've written. Certainly that gives you an opportunity, and you're showing investment in the system and the publisher in such a way that you can say, well, I'd like to work with you. Here's something I have. Do you want to do something different? Maybe that's not exactly what they're looking for, but you've shown kind of your proof of product. I'm right now doing some work for Ninth Level Games on what I would describe as being, well, they have their mazes fantasy RPG, and they have Return to Dark Tower, the license for Return to Dark Tower, for the RPG. And I'm doing a 12 adventure arc for that, in which was working on the sixth adventure while I was waiting for you guys to hop on, which could probably be described as Dragonlance War of the Lance like, but I consistently have to go back and, as part of running it at conventions or elsewhere, I have to figure out when I've sort of gotten too close to being like, oh, this is actually just War of the Lance. I was talking with Gareth Ryder Hanrahan, who has written for practically everything, and he goes, yeah, there are some times where authors are just like, they've figured out that they want this thing, but they want to improve upon it in a way that's not bad. I love War of the Lance. There are some parts of it that are very 1980s and probably very Mormon, that I don't necessarily enjoy the most of, and no shade to Mormons. I The same thing could probably be said about Hasidic Judaism with this adventure arc that I'm doing right now, where there's a lot of like philosophy that's underpinning parts of it. And if you go and you look at it, like, oh well, I know exactly where I unintentionally stole that from, and this is what it is. So.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the Dragonlance stuff. You know, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, they'll come for you. I don't know if they're still alive, honestly, the authors of the novels.
They are alive.
Okay, good.
They did a 3-book arc, which was fine. But they're alive. They're very lovely people. I've met Margaret on a couple of occasions. I've never met Tracy, though. He stopped running the killer breakfast. He would, at Gen Con every year, he would do a killer breakfast, and people would show up and they'd play for a little bit and he'd kill people. It's like the intro to Faster, Purple, Warm, Kill.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And you go through, like, you buy a ticket and be 200 people and 200 people dead at the end of it. He stopped doing those when he started to go work for, I think he was working for a video game publisher for a while. And just didn't have the time to make it out from Utah, which is unfortunate. He's back now. He was part of the D&D Icons announcement at Gen Con. But yeah, so to some degree, in terms of talking with other publishers, going and showing that you're invested, or going and running their stuff and saying, hey, I also do this. That's really how I broke into freelancing, to be perfectly honest, is that I had a CV and I had done some monster design that wound its way into Kobold Press books. And I'm just like, hey, if I send you an adventure pitch, would you be willing to look at it? And they knew me from running 2 years worth of adventures for them. One of their freelancers at the time was the guy who was doing the con stuff, and he was introducing me to people as the person who did the Bar Brawl, which was my first published adventure design, which is just a swarm monster of drunk humanoids. Yeah, it's delightfully simple. But yeah, and so, like, you can work your way into that, or you can say, hey, look, I'm interested in doing this sort of thing. When I went back to Nine Public Games, when I came to them initially, I had met with them through Unpub, a great group that runs a convention called the Unpublished Network, or Unpub. They're trying to do more with RPGs, so pay attention to that space is what I would say. But I showed up to PAX Unplugged and was like, hey, I went through your polymorph system, and I have this idea for a thing, and it wasn't great, but what it did show is I figured out how to work through the system and design something with their design document, and that got me all sorts of ways there. And it's just like, here are a couple things, look at this and pitch me on something that we do. Like, I just wanted to do a very vanilla heist adventure, and they had just put out Pigeons 11, which was their Be Birds Do Crimes heist adventure. It's great.
I haven't heard of that one before. That's
I
awesome.
hadn't heard. I like Ninth Level. I like Polymorph a lot. I consider Polymorph with the Grit system, Forge in the Dark, Together We Go. I mean, I think these are the modernist systems, you know, that are complete, that allow you to do a lot of different kinds of storytelling, that are always really fun, player agential, and they're crucially they use power to they use ways that players do things to create the world. So there's a kind of recursivity which I think is really important, where players are doing world stuff as well. It's not totally sort of walled off into kind of Gygaxian GM, world builder, referee, and then everyone else is just kind of showing up. But I had not heard of that. We'll have to have we've been meaning to have them on. We'd love to have them on the show. But it's really cool to hear what you're saying. A lot of it is it's inspiring, and it sounds really simple when you put it like that. It's right. It's like show interest, you know, be genuine, bring some cool ideas, and even if people don't buy a given idea, they might be like, okay, well, can we work together, right? Which I think is a really crucial takeaway to me from what you're saying, is that you know, the more you can do that, and the more you then presumably you also have to write and deliver, right? You actually have to say, okay, I wrote the thing, here it is, on time, whatever you agree on. But assuming you want to do that, you can do that, then it's not, I mean, I would completely agree from the work I've done. It's like people are in this industry, it's a very small industry, people are pretty chill, and so a lot of it is just like, do they know who you are? Do they know what you like and what you say you're good at? And again, some of that is an interesting, at least to me, I don't know what you think, Ben. I found it odd because it's like you almost do have to interrogate yourself. Like, wait, what is the thing I most want to do? Let's say I have 5 minutes. I'm going to pitch this person. They're very nice. We're having coffee, whatever. What am I pitching them on? Right. You know, and what is the adventure or game or whatever I want to write? What do I want to do with their system? You realize quickly, and it makes total sense. They, of course, it's their baby, right? When you're talking about their system, they have very complex ideas about what the system is, you know, good for. It's just the same way we would about our own material. So it's interesting to kind of, you know that going in, but it's very different in the space of a con, where again it's kind of a crucible. You have limited time and energy, and you're trying to take meetings or like chat about what people are up to in the future, and sort of decide, you know, do we want to kind of work together? So it's cool to hear some of your experience there, and that makes sense that if you do have an adventure you feel passionately about, you can begin maybe, you know, shopping it around, mentally thinking like, who might want to publish this, right?
Yeah. We also with when it comes to, and I know we're coming up on time here, but when it comes to some degree with self-publishing, I self-published a physical adventure for the first time in a decade. That was not just a print-on-demand thing, and I, you know, had to try to pitch it to different places where it was just like, hey, I've got this thing, and you know, what is it you're interested in? And initially the thing I was looking at doing was like rules hacks for Shadowdark, for example, and that sort of uniformly struck out as people may or may not be super interested in it, but they didn't want to take a chance on, like, this is my baby, and you're telling me this is a better way to run this game. Like, oh, well, you should really have fatigue rules from Cairn and Shadowdark, and this is a way that it makes Raceland make more sense within Shadowdark. Sorry to get back to Dragonlance. Or, you know,
it all comes back to Dragonlance.
We also feel you. We wrote a sick hack of Shadowdark. It's called Danse Macabre. I'm just saying it there. Sorry, Ben,
it's not a hack of Shadowdark at all.
No, I mean the like we improved it. Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So, I mean, ultimately what happened was that I did talk with the folks at the Arcane Library, and we did it. I self-published an adventure because we were looking for prize support for events at Gen Con, and part of it is like, well, if you can't get prize support, you know, how much does it cost to print 100 scenes? And it was a lot cheaper than what we would have paid out of pocket for it. So, out of pocket for other prize support that was official. So we did an adventure called Defenestration of the Fell Queen, which is something we had run at Gen Con beforehand. Yes, I know. It's a great name.
We love Defenestration over at Stillfleet Studio. I feel like a lot of our games have a power called Defenestrate.
There literally is a power in Stillfleet called Defenestrate.
Yeah, there's one in Danse Macabre as well.
Yeah, well, we didn't have an actual Defenestration in the Gen Con 2025 adventure. So when I wrote it for instead of 8 tables running it at once, because I do big mega games like that, we did it as a single table adventure. At the end, when you defeat the Fell Queen, the Fell Queen has to fall out a window and explode into a nothingness, but you like night and different things like that. I don't want to ruin what is a little bit of a twisty adventure where you're unpacking memories of going from a 0 level dirt farmer to a 4th level actual competent fighter who's taking on this Fell Queen. But it's good, and I got to put a rock in it.
Wait. Sorry, you got to put a rock like a giant bird, or like the
like
rock,
or like a mineral, or
just a geological.
Rock with a V. Though.
Vrock.
Oh,
I'm
Vrock.
Sorry.
Vrock,
I think we
gotcha.
heard rock like ROC was my guess.
Definitely did.
If we could have put Dwayne the Rock Johnson in it, that also would have been interesting.
Jay-Z's imprint, whatever.
Now I just want to write an NPC that is Dwayne the Rock Johnson, but it's ROC Johnson. It's a giant bird, but he's got the eyebrows of the Rock. And you hear its cry from the distance. Do you smell what the Rock is cooking?
You could just do this, Chris, and you could even
pitch
publishers and get turned down as they say, I don't want to deal with the IP law issues around the likeness.
Kelsey, do you want to put this in Shadow Dark?
Here's what you need.
Here's the problem, though. I want Dwayne the Vrock Johnson. Now.
The Vrock Johnson. Well, hey, listen, it can exist in many valences, many forms. We can.
That's the obvious winner idea of the stupid things we were just saying about. I'm sure that adventure sounds really cool. To go back to like memory, I think that's a great. We was just talking with a friend about this. The idea of flashbacks and character, like letting players build up a character through what they already have done. How do they reach a moment of essentially superhero level power having, but let them go back and imagine and fill in those gaps, and trying to build that into adventure specifically, I think is a really powerful way to bridge, like a lot of what we've been talking about recently is bridging those kind of story game procedures into traditional fantasy adventure, so that people can get the simulationist crunchy power having, but also you can have really set scenes that are pretty much automatically cool. They're automatically poignant. They're interesting. And I think stuff like that is great, and writing individual adventures is one way to build up your library of tools and to try stuff out. I realize we are running up on time, so I want to make sure we give you plenty of time, Ben, so we still have time. What are you working on? What has come out? How what are some of the things you're excited about? I know you've written a lot. I know we last spoke about 6 months ago about A Lease on Art, published by Plus One Experience as part of the RPG Zine Club, which I'm a fan of. But I'm sure you've been working on stuff since then. So in addition to Shadow Dark Adventures, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to sort of shout out?
So right now, just in terms of stuff that's coming out of Gen Con, for example, my current writing partner, Tim Hitchcock, and I are doing a number of Shadow Dark adventures. We have the aforementioned Defenestration of the Fell Queen. You can find that at RPG Trader. If you reach out to me, I have 40 copies of that we were not able to hand off to the Arcane Library at Gen Con that will get used up somehow, but you can pick that up. We're also going to look at updating a couple more of those probably in the springtime would be my guess. Assuming we do the same thing next year for Gen Con with the same gaming group. What I would say is we're probably going to work on getting stuff done in January for the gaming group, and then going back and doing the other topics, or the other things like the publishing for some of the prize support in after the fact. That way we're focusing on the new content first. We're also probably going to do a lot less new content now that we have some stuff backed up. Anyways, Defenestration of the Fell Queen, you can find it on RPG Trader. You can also reach out to me. I'll give my contact information here in a little bit. I did so on Itch, there's an Appendix N Jam, which I did another Shadow Dark adventure for, which is called A Flickering Hope in Fusang. If folks want to check that out, rate it. I would love to see that. It's a Shadow Dark adventure. It very much tries to meld the old school. You are you are fantasy people who've come across a science fiction thing, uh, very Barrier Peaks like in certain ways. There's a big old brain that you get to fight alongside, and I think it's a lot of fun. It's 4 pages, including the cover, which is also the map. So
Oh, that's awesome.
if you want to check that out, that's something I threw together relatively quickly when, again, inspiration struck. And it's just like, oh, well, it's a Star Trek episode that deserves to be a Shadow Dark adventure. Elise on Art 3+1 experience. It's a heist adventure. You're playing as preservers, who are people who are trying to protect the physical media that we still have after the government has basically outlawed it in the interest of all sorts of different things, but namely forcing you to, instead of being able to take, for example, a record off the wall and throw it onto the turntable, you need to rent it, and you need to continue to pay monthly fees in order to access the art that you have or see the things you did have, which is unfortunately becoming very, very. This took 1.5 years to eventually get over the hurdle, like the finish line, but it's gotten increasingly more complicated. But it's set in a future hellscape of 2022 that hasn't happened yet.
Oh man, art really does imitate life. It's crazy. Or life imitates art. Both.
Yeah.
Either way, take your pick. Especially now that we see, Amazon and all these large AI companies destroying rare books in order to.
Yeah.
Rollerball was right. It turns out. They were right all along.
Then just for some other stuff, there's a series I did on the Kobold Press blog back in 2023 as part of Dungeon 23. I was the producer of it in the sense that I made sure the trains run and the content got edited down. But it's a 64-page black and white zine that would work very nicely for any kind of system, for that matter. But it's called Hastening Doom. I like it a lot. I'm glad to see it's gotten off of the digital page and into actual pages. Other than that, I talked about Return to Dark Tower. If you're interested in, I believe once the 6th adventure is out or in their hands, they'll begin putting them together into books similar to what Trick has been doing for Mazes and Mazes City of Skulls. So that will be that. That's really right now my major thing, other than just getting distracted by. Game jams, which I'm really trying not to do because I need to get this done so I can go do other things. And then lastly, who could forget about the podcast? All Year Dream About Gaming Conventions, the podcast you didn't know you needed about Gen Con, Origins Game Fair, PAX Unplugged, the AYIDAGC Convention Industrial Complex and beyond. In about an hour and a half here, I'll be recording episodes 243 and 244. We're going to start hitting, we're just about to hit sort of our post-Gen Con break once we get the other side of Labor Day. And we've got some content lined up for that. And then we're back at it. We've got Game Hole Con coming up in October. That is one of the conventions we're both going to be at. Quarex and myself are both going to be at 3 or 4 of the days. We also have PAX Unplugged coming up, as well as all sorts of little conventions that we go to in the Mid-Atlantic, New York area, or in the Midwest, which is where Quarex is out at, in all sorts of places, Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, probably some amount of Missouri, and I think he also occasionally makes his way out to Nebraska.
Wow, he's really got the plains covered. That's wild.
People be driving,
People do be driving. God, moving back to Texas reminds me. People do be driving. It's crazy.
A Midwesterner's opinion of what a long drive is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different. It's different even than, as I recall, the East Coast Drive world is. Yeah, Ben, these are all really exciting. We'll have to shout out a few things briefly. So Appendix NJAM, we also have our submission, Weird of the Winter Worm. I didn't realize you were in it. There are like 332 entries, so I have not read them all, but I will read yours immediately, Ben. And I'm excited for that. And yeah, there's a lot of good content. Appendix N Jam is one of the bigger, I would say, OSR, NSR jams where you get a lot of cool submissions, in part because they're all 4-page dungeons. You know, they're all 4-page adventures. They have this prescribed pulpy title, so it's a fun one. We are at the tail end. We have 1 week left in the Grit System Game Jam as of the time of this recording. By the time the podcast drops, it'll be done. The judges will be a reading. But yeah, if you're working on a Grit System Game Jam project, please get those in. And Ben, hit us up with those links so we can drop them in the show notes and everyone can check out more of your work. With that, I mean, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and we can close it on out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've mostly hit most of the final question, but Ben, where can folks find you personally online, find your writing, and also where can they find all your I Dream About Gaming conventions on all of the socials and pluggables and all that good stuff?
Well, the last one's the easiest of them because we're lazy and we have a linkter. So if you go to Dream About Gaming Conventions, because again, the name of our podcast is too long for most usernames. We're not even members of Gamma under our full title because they have a hard stop at 20 characters. We are members of Gamma, but we are members of Gamma's Dream About Gaming Conventions.
Yeah, as the abbreviated.
Yeah. Eventually, we will probably, as we begin to spin up. So you'll be able to find links to our podcast there. The main one, All Your Dream About Gaming Conventions, the new sister cast, All Your Dream About Game Reviews, as well as Facebook and Instagram. And we don't have TikTok because we're both federal government adjacent, and that's a kind of weird thing to spend a lot of time dealing stuff with. But we're also on Blue Sky. You know, we're not on Twitter because we decided to avoid that cesspool forever. But we're very much on Facebook because I am in my 40s. So you can find that there. In terms of reaching out, if you're interested in reaching out to me through the podcast or anything else, that may be the best way to do it. If I was better, I would have a website with my CV and different things on it, and it's just not something that I've been able to necessarily achieve. And I don't know necessarily what it's something that would be nice to have, but I might just have to be lazy and link to myself as an author at this point. But if you want to reach out about anything, feel free to reach out through our email, dreamaboutgamingconventions@gmail.com, or through any of the socials. I'm sitting on most of them because I am the administrative side. Quarex's Vibes, I'm administrative, is sort of the breakdown. Don't want to say that I can't be exciting and full of joy and whimsy like he is. He wrote the last 2 scripts, so he can sometimes do those sorts of things as well. But we both have our strengths, and me answering the emails and him being awesome and attracting people to listen to the podcast by being just so delightful is sort of the breakdown for us there. So.
Hey, listen, someone's got to keep the lights on, someone's got to keep the train running. You got to.
Well, I'd like to think in the world of podcasting about TTRPGs, we're all awesome. Ben Eastman, thanks so much for joining us, talking about your work, your process, all your I Dream About Gaming conventions, and plenty of Shadow Dark and possibly other and polymorph game hacks and adventures and whatnot. We'll have to check back in. We're happy to join you. We'll be, of course, at PAX. We'll be at GaleCon in Dublin, random. And we'll probably be back at it again next year with a full calendar of regional and larger cons in and around, Philly and New York, and maybe even Tejas.
Maybe.
Until then, we'll be back with more Why You Roll. Why does anyone?
Why you roll?
Very soon. Thanks to all our rollers. It's now stuck in my head. This is the term.
You said that so apprehensively, though.
I know, but next time it won't be. It'll be
authoritative.
The last, like 2 hours.
Why? I gotta stop you here. Your meetups need to be roller derbies. reach out to me. I'm floating
Yeah,
back.
yeah, we'll do some
You're available
we'll do
for
some consulting
freelance,
with you.
branding. Yeah. Well, with that, see you at the next roller derby rollers. Thanks for listening to Why We Roll. Thanks, Ben Eastman, and of course Chris Pickett, as ever, and Vex
Of
in the chat.
course.
Bye.
All right. Good night, everybody.